Mara Ellison had a gift that most people would have called a blessing. She could make anyone feel seen. Her eyes, an uncommon shade of grey-green, seemed to absorb pain and reflect warmth back. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers would approach her with their troubles. And she always listened, always helped, always said yes. When her co-worker forgot a report deadline, Mara stayed up all night finishing it. When her elderly neighbor's cat went missing, she spent 3 days combing the alleys behind their apartment complex. When her brother asked for money to cover his temporary debt, she emptied her savings. People praised her endlessly. "You have such a big heart, Mara. The world needs more people like you." They never noticed the exhaustion behind her smile. Mara's apartment mirrored her soul, tidy but cluttered with other people's messes. Bags of clothes she had promised to donate, dishes belonging to friends who never came back for them, half-repaired items she'd volunteered to fix. Her life was a museum of unfinished favors. One evening she walked home through the drizzle, umbrella forgotten again because she'd lent it to a co-worker. A man sat on the curb near the corner grocery, soaked, shivering, and clutching a paper sign that read, "Help me, please." Something in his eyes, a hollow, desperate sadness, made her stop. "Are you okay?" she asked, kneeling beside him. He blinked up at her, rain streaking down his face. No one's ever asked that before. His name was Evan. He said he had lost his job, his apartment, everything. Mara didn't question his story. She only saw someone broken. She took him to her apartment, gave him soup, dry clothes, and a place to sleep on her couch. It felt good, right, to help. The world had taken too much from people like him, and if she could restore even a fraction of faith, it was worth it. Over the following days, Evan stayed. He washed the dishes, fixed a leaky faucet, even bought groceries with what little he had. Mara convinced herself that this was temporary, until he found a job, until he got back on his feet. But a subtle shift began. He started making comments, small, cutting ones that sounded like concern. "You shouldn't trust people so easily. You do too much for everyone. They don't deserve you. And then, you'd be lost without me, wouldn't you?" Mara laughed it off, not realizing the shadow behind his words. At night, when she couldn't sleep, she told herself that kindness always came back multiplied, that helping Evan was proof that good deeds could heal the world. But deep down, something uneasy stirred. Because sometimes, when the light shines too brightly, it casts the darkest shadows. At first, Evan's presence in Mara's apartment felt like a gentle hum, something she could tune out. He was quiet, polite, and even grateful. He made coffee in the mornings and waited for her to come home from work before eating dinner. He thanked her for everything, for the couch, for the food, for the warmth. Gratitude, she thought, was the most beautiful sound a person could make. But gratitude can turn heavy when it lingers too long. By the second week, she noticed he rarely left the apartment. His job search was always starting tomorrow. The coffee he made began to taste too strong, and the way he hovered near her while she got ready for work made her skin prickle. One evening, when she returned home, she found her spare house key missing from the hook. "Oh, I took it," Evan said casually, "in case I needed to run out for groceries or something." Something in his tone made her pause. He smiled, but it was thin, too careful, the kind of smile that hides something. That night, Mara dreamed of her front door creaking open on its own. She woke at 3:14 a.m., heart pounding, to the faint sound of footsteps in her kitchen. "Evan," she whispered, stepping into the dark. He was standing by the sink staring out the window. "Couldn't sleep," he murmured. "It's so peaceful when everyone's quiet. You can finally hear what people really think." The next morning he apologized, laughed it off, and made her pancakes. Mara told herself she was overreacting. After all, hadn't everyone told her that kindness required patience, that people heal at their own pace? Yet a quiet voice in her head, one she rarely let speak, began to ask questions. Why did his story never quite add up? Why did he flinch when she mentioned calling her brother? Why did his eyes always flicker toward her phone when it buzzed? Then came the small changes in her daily life. Her co-workers stopped asking for help as often. Maybe they felt she'd grown distant. Her best friend, Leela, said Mara had been different lately, quieter, distracted. "Mara, you can't save everyone," Lila warned over coffee one afternoon. "Sometimes helping someone means losing a piece of yourself." Mara smiled sadly. Maybe that's the point of kindness, to give pieces away. Lila's gaze softened, but her words stayed. Losing a piece of yourself. That evening, Mara returned home early. The apartment was empty, or so it seemed. Evan's duffel bag sat on the couch, open. Inside, she saw something she hadn't expected. Several envelopes, each with different names, different handwriting. One of them had her own name on it. Before she could open it, the door creaked. Evan stood there holding a bouquet of wilted daisies. "You're home early," he said, voice light but eyes sharp. Her heart skipped. The envelope trembled in her hand. "I was just cleaning," she lied. He smiled again, that same too careful smile. "You shouldn't touch other people's things, Mara. It's not very kind." And for the first time in her life, Mara felt what true fear of another person's kindness could mean. Mara had always believed that kindness was a circle, that what you gave would eventually find its way back to you. But now it felt more like a noose tightening slowly around her throat. Evan began to repay her kindness in ways that didn't feel like gratitude at all. He would clean obsessively, rearranging her furniture without asking, insisting it felt better this way. He cooked every meal, though she'd never asked him to. He began speaking about her life as if it were theirs. "Our bills," he'd say, though only her name was on the lease. "Our plans for next month. Our future." Mara laughed the first few times, awkwardly, nervously. But the word "our" started to dig under her skin. She tried to set boundaries. "Evan, I appreciate everything you've done, but maybe it's time you looked for your own place." He froze, expression unreadable. Then came the soft smile, the one that made her stomach twist. "After everything we've shared? You're serious?" "I just think you deserve independence," she said gently. "You can rebuild your life." He tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly. "And what about you, Mara? Who's going to take care of you?" She didn't answer. Over the next few days, small inconveniences started to plague her. Her alarm didn't go off one morning. The settings had changed. Her phone passcode stopped working, and she had to reset it. Her work emails showed failed logins at odd hours. She wanted to believe it was coincidence, but coincidence had become a luxury she couldn't afford. One night, she caught him going through her desk drawers. When she demanded to know what he was doing, he said, "I was just making sure your bills were paid on time. You're too trusting. People might take advantage of you." Her hands trembled. "You're taking advantage of me." For a moment, his eyes went dark, flat, emotionless. Then, like a mask sliding back into place, he smiled again. "You don't mean that. You're tired. I'll make tea." Mara locked her bedroom door that night. It didn't help her sleep. In the following weeks, her world shrank. Friends she once saw every weekend stopped calling. She missed birthdays, dinners, invitations. Evan always had a reason. "You've been so stressed," he'd say, hiding her phone or deleting messages. "You need to rest." Her boss began to notice her lateness, her distracted gaze. "Everything okay at home?" he asked one afternoon. She almost said no. Almost. But she caught herself. What would she say? That the man she helped might be quietly dismantling her life. It sounded paranoid. And kindness, she reminded herself, doesn't accuse without proof. One evening, she gathered her courage and opened the envelope she had found in his bag. Inside was a photograph of her, leaving work, another of her standing at her window, unaware. A note scrawled beneath, "You understand me." Her heart stopped. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat by her bedroom door, clutching her phone, waiting for dawn. When the first light of morning crept through her curtains, she realized something terrifying. Kindness wasn't always about giving. Sometimes it was about survival, about deciding who deserved it and who didn't. And Mara, for the first time, began to wonder if kindness could kill. Mara began to study Evan the way a scientist studies a dangerous specimen, cautiously, quietly, pretending she wasn't afraid. Every gesture, every word, every silence became a clue. By day, he was still the same soft-spoken man she had rescued from the rain. He cooked, cleaned, smiled, but when he thought she wasn't looking, his eyes went distant, calculating. He would stand at the window for hours, staring down at the street, murmuring to himself. One morning, while he was out buying groceries, Mara took the chance to search the apartment. Her hands shook as she opened drawers and cabinets. Beneath the couch cushion, she found a small black notebook. Inside were pages of handwriting, neat, deliberate. At first, she thought it was a journal. Then she began to read. Kindness is currency. The weak spend it without knowing the cost. She trusts too easily. She needs to learn the price of mercy. When she finally says no, That's when she'll see me." Mara's stomach turned. The words weren't just about her, they were about many. Dozens of names, places, little notes beside each one. Stayed 3 weeks. Moved when I started locking the door, never looked back. Her hands trembled as she turned the last page, blank except for one sentence scrawled in the center: "The kind ones never fight back." She snapped the notebook shut and shoved it into her bag. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. When Evan returned, she tried to act normal, but something in her face must have betrayed her. His gaze lingered a little too long. "You look pale," he said, setting down the groceries. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," she murmured. He smiled. "You should rest. You're always doing too much." That night, she hid the notebook beneath her mattress. She needed to tell someone, Lila, the police, anyone, but fear choked her voice. How could she explain it without sounding hysterical? A man she'd invited into her home, helped out of pity, was now documenting her like a specimen. Days passed in a blur of silence. Evan grew more possessive, more certain of his place in her life. He began to speak in we again, but now it sounded like a threat. "You and I are the same, Mara," he said one evening as they ate dinner. "We care too much. That's why people hurt us." She looked at him, truly looked, and realized something chilling. He wasn't lying. In his mind, everything he did was an act of kindness. His control, his manipulation, his surveillance, all twisted forms of care. He believed that protecting someone meant owning them. That night, as he slept on the couch, Mara stood in the doorway watching him. The moonlight fell across his face, softening the sharpness in his features. He looked peaceful, almost fragile, but she knew better now. Kindness had turned her into his captive, a willing participant in her own confinement. Quietly, she slipped on her coat, grabbed her bag, and stepped into the hallway. Her hands were still shaking as she pressed the elevator button. The doors opened, and then a voice behind her said, low and calm, "Going somewhere, Mara?" She froze. Slowly she turned. Evan stood there, barefoot, the black notebook in his hand. His smile was gone. "You shouldn't read things that don't belong to you," he said softly. "It's not very kind." The doors closed between them. Mara didn't wait to see if he followed. She ran. Mara didn't stop running until her lungs burned and her legs felt hollow. The night air sliced her cheeks as she stumbled through the streets, gripping her bag like a lifeline. Every sound, footsteps, car doors, even the whisper of wind, felt like him. She ducked into a late-night diner, shaking. The fluorescent lights stung her eyes, the hum of an old jukebox filling the silence between her ragged breaths. A waitress approached, frowning. "You okay, honey?" Mara forced a smile. "Just needed some air." She sat in a corner booth, pretending to scroll her phone while her mind replayed every warning she'd ignored. She wanted to call Lila, but what would she even say? "You were right. My kindness became a trap." The thought made her stomach twist. Instead, she dialed her brother, Adam. He answered groggily. "Mara, it's 1 a.m. Adam, I need somewhere to stay, just for a few days." "What happened?" "Please, I'll explain later." Within an hour, she was in a cab headed across town, glancing behind her every few blocks. She didn't see Evan, but absence was no comfort. She could feel him like a shadow that had learned her heartbeat. Adam's apartment was messy, warm, and blessedly ordinary. He looked at her, hair wild, eyes red, and didn't ask questions. "Take my bed," he said simply. "We'll talk tomorrow." But sleep didn't come. Every creak in the floorboards made her flinch. She kept the notebook clutched to her chest like a shield. Morning came grey and heavy. Adam brewed coffee and finally asked, "Who's Evan?" The name caught in her throat. "Someone I tried to help." She told him everything. The rain, the lost job, the photos, the notebook. When she finished, Adam's expression was a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You brought him into your apartment." "Mara, that's insane." "I know," she whispered. "I thought I was helping." He rubbed his temples. "You always think that." He wanted to call the police. Mara hesitated. "I don't have proof of anything criminal, just strange behavior." Adam slammed the table. "He stalked you, he documented you. That's not strange, that's dangerous." Mara flinched. "I just want this to end." They agreed she'd stay for a week, maybe 2. Adam changed his locks and kept watch whenever she left for work. For the first time in months, she felt almost safe, until the note appeared. It was waiting on her car windshield one morning, a single sheet of paper folded neatly. Inside, in Evan's precise handwriting, were 3 words: "You forgot me." Her heart dropped. She scanned the parking lot, but there was no one. Just the ordinary buzz of a weekday morning. That night, Adam installed security cameras and insisted she keep her phone on loud, but Mara barely heard him. Her mind was already unraveling. Every act of kindness she'd ever given, every door she'd opened, every hand she'd offered, now looked like a weakness he could exploit. Kindness had always been her compass. Now it felt like a curse. She stared at the note again, tracing the words. "You forgot me." It wasn't a threat, it was a reminder, one she couldn't ignore, because deep down, she hadn't forgotten him. And that terrified her more than anything. For several days, Mara lived in a fragile rhythm. Coffee with Adam in the morning, quiet hours at work where she tried to convince herself that everything was normal, then sleepless nights, replaying the sound of Evan's voice in her head. The city kept moving indifferent while she drifted like a ghost through her own life. Adam tried to make her laugh. "You need to stop collecting strays," he said one night, half joking. "Not everyone deserves saving." Mara smiled weakly. "I know." But she didn't. Not really. Because despite everything, part of her still believed Evan had once been genuine. That maybe, somewhere beneath the manipulation, there was a person she had truly helped. That illusion shattered on a Thursday morning. Mara was leaving work when she noticed a familiar figure standing across the street. The grey coat, the stillness, the way the world seemed to blur around him. Evan. He didn't move, didn't call her name. He simply watched. Their eyes met for one endless heartbeat, and then he turned and disappeared into the crowd. She froze, pulse hammering. For a moment she considered chasing him, demanding an explanation, but fear rooted her to the spot. She could only whisper his name into the empty air, her breath trembling. When she got home, Adam was already there. "What happened?" he asked, seeing her face. "He's back," she whispered. Adam grabbed his jacket. "We're calling the police." They filed a report that night. The officer listened politely, but with the detached patience of someone who'd heard too many similar stories. "Do you have proof he's stalking you?" he asked. Mara handed over the note from her windshield and the notebook she'd found. The officer frowned as he flipped through the pages. "Strange, but not illegal," he said finally. "We'll keep it on record. Not illegal." The words rang in her ears. Kindness hadn't protected her, and now neither could the law. 2 days later, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. A message. "You taught me everything I know about love." She deleted it, blocked the number, turned her phone off. But blocking Evan was like trying to erase smoke. He found other ways. Small signs. A flower left on the doormat. Her name scratched lightly into the condensation on her car window. A whisper on the other end of a silent call. The fear began to change her. She became sharper, colder, wary of everyone. When a coworker asked for help on a project, she refused. When a stranger dropped their wallet near her, she left it on the ground. It was easier not to care. "Safer," Adam noticed. "This isn't you," he said quietly. Mara looked at him with hollow eyes. "Maybe it's who I should have been all along." That night, she woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Adam's door was open, his bed empty. Her blood went cold. She grabbed the nearest object, a lamp, and crept forward. "Adam?" she whispered. A voice answered from the shadows, calm, familiar, terrifying. "See? You do remember me." The lamp slipped from her hands. Evan stood in the half-light, smiling. "You shouldn't have left without saying goodbye." Mara's breath caught. Her worst act of kindness had found its way home. Mara didn't scream. Fear froze her voice in her throat. Evan stood just inside the doorway, his hands at his sides, as calm as if he'd merely come to visit. Adam appeared a second later from the kitchen, holding a baseball bat. "Who the hell are you?" Evan's eyes flicked toward him, amused. "You must be Adam. She told me about you. Always protective, always skeptical. You never believed in her kindness." Adam took a step forward. "Get out before I call the cops." Evan smiled faintly. "You already did, remember, they didn't care." Mara's heart pounded so hard it hurt. "Evan, please," she said softly. "You need to leave." "I did leave," he replied. "You're the one who forgot what we had." His calmness was more frightening than rage could ever be. He didn't yell, didn't threaten. He simply spoke as though the world still revolved around his idea of affection. Adam swung the bat once, not to hit, but to warn. "You've got 10 seconds. For a moment, time held its breath. Then Evan sighed, as though disappointed in both of them. "You think I'm the monster," he said quietly, "but you made me. You taught me that kindness means never giving up on someone. I just learned the lesson too well." He turned and walked out, closing the door behind him. Mara collapsed into a chair, shaking. Adam locked every bolt, every chain, then knelt beside her. "We're getting a restraining order tomorrow, you hear me?" She nodded weakly, but deep inside she knew it wouldn't stop him. People like Evan didn't obey paper boundaries. The next day blurred into paperwork and waiting rooms. The police took her statement again, more seriously this time. A detective promised to look into it. Adam drove her home, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" he asked. "He could have hurt you." Mara stared out the window. "Because I kept thinking I could fix him." That night she couldn't sleep. Fear had replaced every other emotion. Every creak of the building made her jolt awake, expecting his shadow at the door. But what haunted her most wasn't the threat. It was the echo of his words. "You taught me that kindness means never giving up." Had she done this? Had her endless mercy created him, or merely attracted him? The next morning she found another envelope slipped under the door. No handwriting this time, just a photograph, her and Adam through the window, sitting together the night before. On the back, one sentence, "I'm learning to share." Mara dropped the photo. Adam cursed under his breath, pacing. "He's escalating. We need to move." Tonight, they packed essentials, drove to a motel 2 towns away and checked in under a fake name. The room smelled of disinfectant and old smoke, but at least it had a lock strong enough to make her believe, for a few hours, that she was safe. As she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Mara realized something she had never dared admit before. Kindness without limits wasn't love. It was surrender. And she'd surrendered everything, safety, trust, even herself, in the name of compassion. Evan hadn't stolen her peace. She had given it away, piece by piece, wrapped in the ribbons of good intentions. And now, to survive, she would have to unlearn everything she once believed was good. The motel was small, the kind of place where the curtains never fully closed and the walls remembered other people's secrets. Mara sat by the window, sleepless again, watching the parking lot glow under the yellow lights. Adam was snoring softly in the other bed. For the first time in days, the world was quiet. Too quiet. She thought about how much had changed in a few months. Before Evan, kindness had been her language, the way she made sense of the world. Helping people filled the silence inside her. But now, every act of compassion looked like a doorway she could never close again. She touched the scar on her wrist, a small burn from when she'd once rescued a stray cat from a broken fence. She used to see it as proof of goodness. Now it just reminded her how easily pain could disguise itself as purpose. Around 3 a.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. "You don't have to be afraid, Mara. I forgive you." Her breath caught. The message didn't come from his old number. He was using a new one. That meant he'd found her again. She shook Adam awake. He blinked at her, bleary-eyed. "What's wrong?" She handed him the phone. His face darkened. "He's here?" "I don't know," she whispered. Adam called the police, but by the time they arrived, the parking lot was empty. The officers found nothing. No footprints, no car, no trace of anyone watching. "Could be spam," one of them said. "Don't respond." After they left, Adam turned to her. "We can't keep running. We have to fight back." Mara stared at him. "How? He knows everything about me." "Then it's time to use that against him." They devised a plan. To lure Evan into the open. Mara still had his old number saved, the one she'd blocked. With shaking fingers, she unblocked it and typed a message she never thought she'd send. "I need to talk. One last time." The reply came within minutes. "I knew you'd come around." Same place as before. Mara didn't have to ask what before meant. Her apartment, the place where it all began. Adam wanted to go to the police first, but Mara stopped him. If he thinks we've involved them, he'll disappear again. So the next evening, they returned. The air was sharp with autumn, the streets nearly empty. Mara's hands trembled as she unlocked the door. Everything inside was exactly as she'd left it, except for the faint scent of cologne that didn't belong to her. Evan stepped from the shadows. "You came." Mara's pulse thundered. "This has to stop." He tilted his head. "Stop. This is kindness. You're teaching me to be better." "No," she said firmly, for the first time without trembling. "I'm teaching you that kindness ends where fear begins." His expression shifted. Confusion, then anger, then something almost like heartbreak. You're lying to yourself. You still care about me. I do, she whispered, but caring doesn't mean letting you destroy me. Before he could reply,